Out of all of the Disney theme parks, Hong Kong Disneyland has probably seen the most change. For starters, it's the only Magic Kingdom-style park that has updated its castle, and despite being rather lackluster upon opening, has quickly solidified itself as a highlight in the Disney park's lineup. Except for one problem. Tomorrowland has always been problematic at almost every Disney park, struggling to find a timeless tomorrow that doesn't quickly become a tired yesterday. While many Disney parks have treated their Tomorrowland as a dumping ground for franchises and IP, no park has done it as strangely as Hong Kong Disneyland, where today their Tomorrowland stands as one of the most confusing and disjointed Disney park lands that strangely might not even exist in a couple years' time. When it opened in 2005, despite Hong Kong Disneyland looking as if they just copy and pasted most of Disneyland in Anaheim, Tomorrowland was one of the most unique lands in this brand new park. Their attempt at a timeless Tomorrowland involved going for more of a sci-fi look and theming the entire land around the idea of a spaceport where you could journey to other planets. With lots of colours designed to pop against the dreary Hong Kong grey skies and large toy-like props, it was a new attempt to beat the dreaded Tomorrowland problem. Going back in time and standing before Hong Kong Disneyland's teeny tiny castle in 2005, let's take a right from the hub and enter past the impressive entrance sign, which is slightly reminiscent of the Mission Space signage at Epcot, to stand in this park's Tomorrowland. Drawing you towards the center of the land is the Orbitron, the first of many attractions. With a name borrowed from Disneyland Paris's Space Spinner, this is probably the most unique version of the Disney staple attraction. Guests flew in relatively spacious UFOs that centered on an impressively large kinetic sculpture that has a lot more color than any of the other versions around the world. The land also contained Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, which, other than the large 12-foot Buzz Lightyear statue at the entrance, was pretty much the exact same ride as you could find at Disney parks across the globe. The obvious big draw for the land, though, was Space Mountain. The gleaming white spires pulled you in towards a unique entrance portal for the ride. Weaving through the queue, you entered the impressive, albeit small, station, which again continued the bright-colored planets feel from the rest of the land. The station also features a large space laser that we can't help but feel may have been taken from the closed Chicago Disney Quest location. They kind of match up, but I haven't got any evidence that it's the same one. Once aboard the ride, it was pretty similar, featuring the same track layout and music as the Disneyland offering, with a few new special effects to simulate space travel. Of course, space travel makes you hungry, and the land includes 2 restaurants upon opening. The Comet Cafe, a food court-styled restaurant giving you a choice between a selection of barbecue, noodles, and wok-fried foods from the Jiangnan region of China, as well as the Starliner Diner, which, according to Disney's words, offered authentic American fast food with a twist of Asian flavor. You couldn't miss this one with the giant rocket out the front, which drew you into your last meal before you head to outer space, continuing the spaceports theme of the land. Hong Kong Disneyland at opening was understandably panned for the small number of attractions on offer, and just a year after opening, they made their first attempts to fix this with a decently sized expansion to Tomorrowland. This was merely the beginning of Tomorrowland becoming the most dynamic and ever-changing land at the park. Whether that's for better or worse, we're yet to see. In the summer of 2006, Autopia would open as the major draw for 3 new attractions. Featuring fully electric vehicles and lush alien-esque landscapes, this arguably was the best version of Autopia ever conceived. Also joining Autopia in this much-needed expansion to the park was Stitch Live, which took place in a theater that randomly existed inside of the Space Mountain building. This was a rather interesting attraction where you interacted with a live performer playing Stitch that existed within 3 different languages, as the official languages of Hong Kong Disneyland were Cantonese, English, and Mandarin. The third new attraction was the UFO Zone, a relatively basic splash pad. In keeping with local Chinese culture, Hong Kong Disneyland made every possible effort to enhance qi around the park. A natural way to enhance qi is when the wind blows. It stirs up the surface of the water, and qi is able to flow freely. Thus, the UFO zone came to be, adding another splash pad to the park after the famed and beloved by all Leaky Tikis. Over the next 7 or so years, Tomorrowland would see temporary additions to try and keep the offering fresh. From 2007 to 2013, they would offer the Ghost Galaxy overlay of Space Mountain around the Halloween season, and from 2008 to 2013, the Muppets Mobile Lab came to the park. But 2013 would be somewhat of a shifting point for the land. Up until then, the offerings had remained relatively stable, but in that year, then Parks and Resorts chairman Tom Staggs would announce that Hong Kong Disneyland would be home to Disney's first ever Marvel ride, the Iron Man Experience. A ride that would begin Tomorrowland's strange transition to become a mismatch of IPs and ideas with little coherence. Construction for the Iron Man Experience began in February of 2014. Despite being on new land outside of Tomorrowland, its construction was rather impactful for the operation of Hong Kong Disneyland's railroad, as it was being built outside the railroad line, meaning the train had to be closed for over a year, and FastPass at Buzz Lightyear was paused until late 2016, but I doubt that really affected anyone because Hong Kong Disneyland was usually relatively quiet. Likewise, in August of 2014, the UFO Zone was temporarily suspended in preparation for the Tomorrowland Party Zone, a stage as part of Disney's Haunted Halloween event. The UFO Zone would proceed to permanently close in April of 2016 to make way for Jedi Training Trials of the Temple, which was part of Star Wars Tomorrowland Takeover event, on top of Hong Kong Disneyland's 10th anniversary celebration. There was a lot happening at this time. As you can imagine, things started getting weird in Tomorrowland because whilst it was being taken over by Star Wars, Marvel was laying out its own section just a few steps away. Part of the galactic takeover included the temporary overlay of Hyperspace Mountain, which, as we explore further, will prove to be anything but. For Disneyland's 60th anniversary and the upcoming Star Wars The Force Awakens film, Disney would introduce a brand new seasonal overlay to their Californian Space Mountain attraction called Hyperspace Mountain, an overlay that continues to operate for a few months every year. Hong Kong clearly enjoyed the sound of this cheap way to market a new attraction and installed the overlay themselves around a year later in 2016. Despite everything originally pointing towards this being temporary, as time goes on, it appears that Hyperspace Mountain is here to stay. To this day, the ride still feels like a temporary overlay. The entrance area is quite nice, featuring a brand new sign that really pops and a life-size X-Wing prop that, unfortunately, you can only see from the upcharge priority admission queue. Past this though, it's pretty much the same queue from the original 2005 attraction with some new videos on the screens, and that's about it. Once you hit the station, you'd be forgiven for thinking you went back in time to the original version of the ride. Aboard the attraction, it is identical to the version offered in California. A relatively fun overlay to the attraction, sure, but one that isn't as good as the vanilla version of this ride. You weave and dodge your way from TIE fighters in the middle of a dogfight, but the lights and projections make the dome too bright and remove the true feeling of zooming around through space. We feel it simply lacks the emotional impact of the preceding iteration. Elsewhere in Tomorrowland, as part of the takeover, they introduced Jedi Training Academy, character meet and greets in the Old Stitch Live Theatre, and a whole lot of food and drink offerings, some served as this cute BB-8 snack cart. All of this time, Marvel was quietly biding their time in another corner of the land, ready for a takeover of their own. Later that year, the Iron Man Experience would proceed to soft open in December of 2016, with an official opening in January 11, 2017, whilst, funnily enough, the Star Wars takeover was still happening. Iron Man Experience itself is a simulator attraction, similar to Star Tours, where Iron Man invites you on a tour through Hong Kong to visit the newly constructed Stark Tower. However, something goes wrong, and Hydra launches an attack on the city led by Arnim Zola, where Iron Man defends the city with your help in the Iron Wing vehicle that you're currently inside. It's a pretty straightforward attraction that wasn't relatively groundbreaking, but it was exactly what Hong Kong Disneyland needed. The expansion also introduced the Iron Man Tech Showcase and Iron Man Meet and Greet location, alongside the Expo Shop, which is basically a Marvel merchandise location. Now, shortly before this all opened, it was announced on November 22, 2016, that Hong Kong Disneyland would receive a $10.9 billion expansion, which included Arendelle, the World of Frozen, Castle of Magical Dreams, multiple new attractions, live entertainment, and Stark Expo. Despite knowing that Iron Man was coming and was just around the corner, Stark Expo was an entirely new announcement. It expanded on the Iron Man idea by splitting off the attraction from Tomorrowland entirely into its own thing with 2 new attractions. Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle was announced to replace Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, and an Avengers Quinjet attraction would be built where Autopia currently stood. At this stage, Autopia had already mysteriously closed, and demolition would begin to make way for the ambitious Avengers attraction. Likewise, in 2017, Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters closed to be reimagined into the Ant-Man attraction. This Ant-Man iteration of the Shooter Dark Ride attraction debuted on March 31st, 2019. The attraction was received with mixed reviews due to its reliance on screens, and similarly to Iron Man, wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking other than a Marvel overlay to an existing ride system. Most people were holding out on the Avengers Quinjet attraction to fill this void for a really breathtaking Marvel attraction, and with its plot of land being completely leveled and Autopia being reduced to atoms, people were excited to learn more about this upcoming attraction. Unfortunately, just a year later in 2020, that thing happened that made a lot of people pretty upset. Despite opening and then closing and then reopening and then reclosing, Hong Kong Disneyland was basically out of commission for over 18 months. Despite this, construction around the park continued. Frozen was coming along nicely, and their new castle began to take shape. But things at Tomorrowland were quiet. Too quiet. Quinjet had not yet broken ground, and likewise its sister attraction, Disney California Adventure Park, was nowhere to be seen. To this day, Avengers Quinjet, despite being announced, remains to be an empty plot of land at both DCA and Hong Kong Disneyland. Autopia was essentially removed for no reason, and recent rumors indicate that we shouldn't hold our breath for this Marvel e-ticket attraction coming to either park anytime soon, with the new ride set to be instead some form of Marvel Multiverse Dark Ride rather than the groundbreaking Quinjet experience. So what remains at Hong Kong Disneyland's Tomorrowland is a Space Mountain with a permanent temporary overlay, a half-realized Stark Expo, a show stage that simply does meet and greets, and a bunch of mismatched holdovers from an intergalactic spaceport idea that has long been forgotten. Next to Star Wars, you have strange toy-like space structures next to planetary light fixtures, next to Stark Expo, next to a burger joint with a giant rocket out the front. Despite Hong Kong Disneyland becoming a very strong theme park, somehow Tomorrowland has gone from being one of the park's most realized lands to a hodgepodge of ideas befitting of a resort's second gate. That's not to say that the attractions within Tomorrowland are necessarily bad, except for Hyperspace Mountain, which I believe is an easy downgrade by excluding Michael Giacchino's iconic soundtrack alone. They're just thematically inconsistent, and the land does little to invoke a sense of wonder that Magic Kingdom-style Disney parks should strive to achieve. Hong Kong Disneyland needs to decide whether they're going all in on Tomorrowland or Stark Expo, because this half-realized hodgepodge will only continue to hurt a park that can't afford to hurt anymore. Which leaves us with one final question. What should they do with this land? Should they embrace Tomorrowland or instead continue down the path of Stark Expo? Everybody is going to have their own opinion, but with a lot of talk at the moment about brand fatigue, it's difficult to say what the right choice is for Hong Kong Disneyland. It's a tough spot for the company to be in, and warning, for the future of IP-based attractions and lands. But over to you. What are your thoughts? For the home of all things theme parks, I'm Dom from ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching.